What I'm going to do in this video is I'm going to show you how to make some cubbies for your academy or for whatever you want to use them for. At my academy I already have cubbies that are a bank of 5. I got 2 rows of those, so I got 10 of them, and I'm getting ready to make 3 banks of 5 connected together, which is 15. So I'm adding 15 cubbies to my academy, and this video is going to just show you the steps that I use to do that. This is basically what I'm making. I'm making cubbies that are 5 in a row and 3 rows, and it's about 78 inches tall, and it's going to be probably about 50 inches wide. Each actual cubby itself is going to be 16 inches wide by 14 inches high, so that's each square by itself is that. So basically I laid out what I needed to do, determined how many pieces of 4x8 plywood I needed. I basically laid it out such that I just need 3 pieces for pretty much everything, and I'll need an extra piece to do the top. And also there's the back, which will have a thinner piece of like 1/4 inch plywood on the back, but the actual plywood to make the thing I used 3/4 inch plywood. So I already did all my cuts, so I bought all the wood. I already did all the cuts on my table saw, and now I got the 4 sides, the 4 uprights that are here, and these are going to be 22 inches wide, and again it's like 78 inches tall. So these are going to be 22 inch deep cubbies. And then I already cut out all the shelves too. So here's all the shelves all cut out, and there's 15 shelves, and each one of these shelves is 16 inches wide by 22 inches deep. And so the next step is I'm going to use this Craig jig. This is called a Craig jig, and I'm going to put some pocket holes, because I'm going to use the shelves attached with what we call pocket screws. And what I do is this Craig jig is going to cut these angled holes, if you will, that are like pre-drilled with this tool, and that's how I'm going to attach the shelves to the uprights. So the next step is this is just a sample board, but the shelf is going to be, one side of it will have the 6 holes. I'm using 3. I spaced them about 3 inches from the end and then 1 in the center. I'm going to use 3 on each side to attach it. It doesn't have a lot of weight. It's going to be holding like people's backpacks and bags and stuff like that. So 3 should be good for each side. But I'll show you how I do those here in a moment. So I got my first piece in this Craig jig, and it just kind of holds it in place with this clamp, and then everything's all set for 3/4 inch thickness of wood, and it's going to drill these little angled pocket holes in the wood that I can put my pocket screws in. So you just line it up to, I'm going to do 3 inches from each side, so that's my mark, and I'm going to go here and you put it in the hole, and it's already got guides and everything, so you just drill down. And there you go. Then I'll disconnect the clamp, and you can see it put the hole in there for my pocket screw. And so when this is done, this is the shelf, but this will be the bottom of the shelf, so you wouldn't see those anyway. And if you wanted to, you could actually, you know, cover them up with dowels, and there's stuff that people do if they're doing these pocket screws in like furniture and stuff like that. But these are just cubbies, so I already did a cubby, and I didn't do anything with those because you can't really see them anyway. So, but anyway, I got to do that on all these shelves. Put those pocket holes in there for my pocket screws. By the way, this is what that jig is. It's called a Craig jig. It's used to drill these pocket hole for your pocket hole screws. I borrowed this one. It's about, I think it's about $99 a kit. They got different parts, but this particular one is $99, but I don't own it. But already also the wood, that sanded plywood that sanded plywood was $45 a sheet. And the reason why I got sanded plywood is because I paint this with, you know, real nice white paint, and I paint blue paint on the shelves to match my Academy colors. And so you can't just get cheap plywood that'll show the knots through and everything. So I spent the money and got really good quality plywood for that. So okay, now that I am done drilling all the pocket holes for the pocket screws and all my shelves, I had 15 shelves. I'm getting everything set up now so that I can prime, or so that I can use Kilt's latex stain blocker. I like to put a coat of that before I paint the things, especially plywood, because the stain blocker is going to seal everything and cover up any stain that the wood may have, and be ready for my regular latex paint that I put on. The side panels are also going to be all primed. So I'll prime the shelves, the side panels. I like to do all that and paint it actually before I put it together, because it's easier to do that with it put together, and then trying to paint is hard in the Cubbies because it's got the tops, sides, and the backs, and you got to reach in there, and it's just hard to do it afterwards. So I like to paint everything, and then I'll put it together, and then it's easy to touch up anything that may need touched up after it's put together. So the next step is Kilt's stain blocker on everything, and then I'm going to paint them. Okay, now that I'm done priming everything with Kilt's stain blocker, everything's dried, I'm going to sand, just a light sand with fine sandpaper, take the roughness out. The primer kind of pulled the grain out a little bit, so it's kind of rough. So I'm just going to lightly sand all of it, and then I'll be able to do my finish coat. All right, all the boards have been lightly sanded. They're smooth. It's got the primer coat on, and now I'm getting ready to put the final coat on. I'm going to use my paint sprayer. You can use a roller. I used a roller when I built my previous set of Cubbies, but I have a paint sprayer now, so I'm going to use it. And I use just a good quality semi-gloss interior, like a trim paint. My Cubbies are going to be white, and I use blue for the shelves. And so I'm going to paint all the white now, and then I'll paint the blue, and then I'll be ready to assemble it. Painting was so much faster with my paint sprayer. I have all my stuff painted, drying, ready for assembly. But wow, I used to use a roller when I did it, but the paint sprayer was fast. Okay, today's assembly day. All the paint's dry. Every surface had 2 coats of paint. Those are the shelves, blue. So they're all dried. Those are the side panels. They're white. And the bottom of the shelves, the part you can't see, they're white. Just the top part is blue. But everything had to have 2 coats. I used a paint sprayer, which worked nice. And now I'm ready for assembly. Okay, now comes the fun part of making the measurements, which is the time-consuming part, just to make sure everything is going to line up right, because I got 4 upright panels, and there's going to be 15 shelves. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4 upright panels, and all the measurements on each one have to be the same, so that the shelves aren't going to be, you know, cockeyed in there. And so just time consuming this step to make sure that all the measurements on each panel are the same. And so what I did was, like, my each panel is 78 inches tall, and I want each shelf to be 14 inches tall, and the overall, each shelf by itself is going to be 14 inches tall by 16 inches wide. And then the depth of the thing is 22 inches. Those are pretty decent sized Cubbies. They will hold, you know, your typical big gym bag size bag. The Cubbies that I have now they're only 20 inches deep, and that's fine, but I want to extend it by 2 more inches. So, but they're the same. They're 14 by 16, and as like I said, that's a pretty decent dimension for each Cubby for people to put their stuff in. So with that being said, that I want from top to bottom, from the bottom of the shelf to the top of the next one to be 14 inches. Also, for my measurements, I had to account for the thickness of the plywood, because the plywood's 3/4 of an inch thick. So from the top, I measured down 14, and then I added 3/4 of an inch, and then I measured down another 14, which took it to 28 3/4. Then I added 3/4 of an inch for another shelf. Then I took it down another 14. Same thing, added the shelf dimension, took it down another 14, added another shelf dimension, and took it down another 14. And those are my measurements along the way that I came up with. And then now I'm just gonna, on the other 3 pieces, I have to make these measurements at those increments and draw my lines on the board. And so I'll have all my pieces will have, you know, the exact same measurements, so that when I start putting my shelves in, they're all going to line up and not be crooked. So that's the numbers I chose, but like I said, I think it's a pretty decent amount of cubby space for each one. That's why I wanted to have that kind of clearance, 14 inches height wise, and they're 16 inches wide. So my first board there, you can't see it, but I did draw my lines on there. There's one of them there in just faint pencil, but they'll be pretty much covered up. And so then what the step's going to be is, the next thing now is, here's one of my shelves. This is the bottom of the shelf, and the blue is the top. And I'm going to just line it up here on the thing that I made, the measurements that I made. I'll line it up, and then I'll start screwing in the pocket screw. That's kind of an example there. And that's the top shelf, by the way. So this will be the top of the cubby, and there'll be a top put on, and then the clearance will be 14 inches there. So that'll be the first shelf I screw on, and then I'm going to put the 5 on there, and then we'll start working on the second panel. So stay tuned. Okay, I'm getting ready to attach the first shelf, but I just wanted to show you the screws that come with this, that go with this Craig's jig system to cut at these pocket holes. They actually have, Craig does have their own screws that they sell, and these are pocket screws. And for 3/4 inch plywood, it tells you what size screw to use, and I needed an 1.25 inch long screw. And these pocket screws are coarse threads because it's going into plywood, and they have a square head on them, and you use a square headed bit. And actually that bit came with the Craig kit. So anyway, so I'm going to start screwing these in, and I'll give you an update in a little while. Alright, I'm ready to put on the second vertical piece. And so now I lay it up on its side like this, and I'm going to get ready to put the second piece on. This is the front of it, and this will be the bottom. And so this is how it'll be if you're looking at it from the front, and this is the top. And so what I did on the second piece now is I put those measurements all the way down it at those increments, 14, 14 3/4, 28 3/4, 29 1/2, etc., etc., all the way down. And I made the little tick marks on the wood, high and low. And then now I'm just going to place this up here and line up everything. And once everything's lined up, high and low, then I'm going to start screwing in those set of screws on this side, and work my way down. So everything will be nice and straight and square if I follow all these measurements that I made. And I'll get the second one in. I'll be working on that now. Okay, so I got the second vertical panel. Now I'm getting ready to put the next row of shelves in. So I laid the thing on its side and made all my measurements appropriately and along the length of it And I'm going to start with the first shelf at the top and screw those in all the way down, 5 shelves, and then I'll flip it and put the next vertical panel on. So things are moving along. Okay, I flipped it back over again, and now I'm ready to put this third vertical panel on, and did the same thing as before. On this panel, I transposed the measurements all the way down on this board here, and so now I can line up where the shelf goes, and I'll put the screws in all the way down here. Okay, so now I'm getting ready to put the third row of shelves in. So flip it back on the edge, and then once again transpose the dimensions for my paper all the way down the side of it. Made the tick marks so that I know where the shelves go, and that's going to be the next shelf I'm going to put in. And we'll keep going, but this is going to be the third and final row. Then I got to put the final outer panel on, so stay tuned. All right, flipped it back over. Time to put the final piece in, the last side. So flipped it over. On a flat like this, it's easier to install the final piece this way. And again, marked all the spots where the shelves go with all the measurements down the board. Just little tick marks. You can't see them here, but and then I'll know where to line it up on the shelving. And all I got to do is just attach this outside piece. So I'm going to go at it. All right, there we go. So it's all assembled. Standing up there in place there. 15 cubbies. I still have to add the top to it, and then the back, you could just mount it up against the wall and use the wall actually as the back, but actually I put a piece of 1/4 inch, something like this, just a really thin 1/4 inch. This is birch, so you can paint it and it looks really nice. It doesn't have bunch of knots in it, but this is a sample piece. But I'll mount that to the back, because actually that helps mount it to the wall. So because you have this surface to screw into where there's studs actually hold it in place. So if I didn't have a back to it, then you'd have to put like angle brackets and stuff. So this just helps kind of, also it helps kind of hold it all in place, putting a back on it. So I'll be putting a back on it, and like I said, a top. And then, it's not even done yet after that. The front, like this is the front, for example, maybe. It's got the plywood edge, and you could just leave it that way or paint it, but I like to put a trim piece. So I'm going to put trim all the way down it, and slats in there, and nail that in place, and then that's how it trims out really nice. Hides that ugly edge of the plywood. So this is just little detail work that I'll do. So that's it so far. Now I'm going to make my trim pieces that will trim out everything. Here's a sample of one. It's going to go vertical on all these, and then also make them go horizontal and trim everything out. So again, it covers that front leading edge of the plywood. And so all these pieces here, I'm going to prime them first and then paint them. But they're basically, it was a 3-inch wide, 1.25 inch thick. This is poplar, and I ripped it in half on my table saw, and those are going to be all my pieces for all the trim. So I'm going to be priming and painting those, and then also the back pieces and the top, and then the back panel. The back panel, I already cut that yesterday. Those are just real thin 1/4 inch, like a paneling board. This is birch, I think, so it paints really nice and have knots in it and stuff. And I had to do it in several pieces because the back's too wide for a sheet of plywood. It's wider than 4 feet wide, so I had to do it in some pieces. So that's what we'll be doing now, is working on those. Also, I got to show you this piece. I'm just sanding the edges where I ripped it. There's little saw marks on these, and just so they don't show after it's painted. I got to show you this nifty little sanding thing. This is like a rubber thing that I got at like a Lowe's or Menards, and it has like Velcro, like the male part of the Velcro on here, and then that comes with these little sanding pads that got the fuzzy part of the Velcro on it, and you can stick these on here, and then this thing works awesome for in your hand because it molds around stuff, and if you're doing like any small sanding needs, this thing's a pretty cool little thing. Okay, I screwed the top on. Top's painted on the underside, you know, to match the rest of the paint. And then now I'm gonna, this is the back, I'm gonna screw the back panels on. That's my next task. Okay, there we go. Got the back on and the top. So now I'm just gonna get ready to put the trim on in the front to trim it all out. So the back is that 1/4 inch plywood, you know, it's painted on this side only, and I screwed the back on, and the top screws hold better. The whole thing's screwed. Don't use nails because all the stresses from, you know, warped wood and making things fit, nails won't hold. They'll pop out. So everything's got to be screwed so everything's held nice and tight. So next I'm going to be working on the trim for the front. Okay, getting ready to cut my trim pieces. Got the first couple cut. I'm going to start putting the trim on. This was a 3-inch wide poplar, and I cut it in half, so it's roughly 1.5 inches wide, and it's 3/4 inch thick, and that's going to hide this ugly plywood edge. So I'm just going to tack it down with my brad nailer gun, and I put a little bit of glue on there to kind of hold it in place as well with the nails. The leading edge of this, you know, because people are putting their bags in and out, so I want to have a little bit more security with the glue also in addition. So I'm going to start by putting the vertical pieces in, and that's what I'm going to do, and then we'll keep moving on. Okay, now I'm getting ready to cut to dimension all the horizontal pieces using my miter saw. So got them marked, and I'm going to cut out 15 of these for the face of each shelf. Okay, so the vertical ones are all in, and now I'm getting ready to put in the horizontal pieces that's going to cover the front of each shelf. All the vertical ones were centered on the plywood. So the plywood's 3/4 inch thick. These are 1.25 inches wide. So there's a slight little overlap, like 1/8 of an inch on each side. So these are all centered on the plywood. And so is this one. So there's kind of a little lip here on the outside. Same with that. And same with the top. But these on the shelves, though I don't want to center it because the people's bags will catch on it. So when these go in place, this will be flush with the shelf. So because I don't want a lip there, you want this to be a continuous surface. So, and then so these will have a bigger overhang underneath. So that's how those will go in place. And by the way, once these are in, all the little nail holes will be countersunk a little bit. Put a little bit of wood putty there, and then paint over that. Same with these little seams, stuff like that, to detail it out. So, but right now anyway, I have the 15 of these horizontal pieces to put in. Forgot to mention, you want to make sure you put, I always put a bead of wood glue across the front of these to kind of help lock the shelf in better than just the nails. I don't put a lot of nails in anyway, but this will help, especially the front when the bags will be exiting and being put in and out from the surface area right here. I want these front pieces to be secure pretty well, so the glue will also help with the nails. Okay, finished up with all the trim pieces, and then now what's left is to use some wood filler to fill all the little nail hole areas and a lot of little joint areas. Here's a spot I already did. Put some of it in the nail holes. Also maybe where some of the joints might have a gap, but these were fit really tight, but sometimes there still is a little bit you want to cover up. So, and then there's like the nail holes I'll cover up. So I'll go do all this and all of it, and then just retouch it up with paint. Won't even know it. So got all that work to do left, and then it'll almost be pretty much done then at that point. Okay, everything is all complete. All the painting's done and all the trim and everything. So ready to take it to the academy and install. Okay, here we go. Brought the Cubbies from my house to the academy in the back of my truck. My son's helped me unload it. It's pretty heavy, and put it up against the wall there. And it's held up against the wall just by 4 screws that are screwed into studs. That's why I put the back on it, so that I didn't know where the studs were going to be, but it didn't matter because you got this full back to work with. And I got a couple screws put in there at the top, down at the top, and then I put some in down low at the bottom. But they're just 4 screws holding it in place. It's secure as can be. And so now I like it to be a little bit more finished look than just, you know, just wooden box there. So I put trim, like my baseboard trim. I'm taking it around and making it look like cohesive there on both sides, over there and there. And then on this back part of the wall, I put some probably some coat hangers or coat hooks type stuff. My other cubby I had done a year and a half ago or so, it's over there. So it's a 10 unit one, and it's you know, got a coat rack there a little bit, so kind of do that on the same side over here. But that's pretty much it. It's got a nice finished look, almost like, you know, a piece of furniture than just, you know, a wooden box there with made out of plywood or whatever. I like trimming it out and making everything kind of look more cohesive and just a little bit more trimmed out. So, but that's the finished product. And so it's kind of a little changing area back there where people can put their bags, and I got spots for 25 bags. So that's good.